between you and me, right where you are right in this moment, is exactly where you were meant to be. So, wherever that may be, just be.
To be a new you.
Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the Joygasmic Life podcast.
Your permission slip to raise your standards and live an even more amazing life. Now, if you're feeling like that's way out of the ball game and you're really suffering with like pain in your body, guilt, shame, anxiety, depression, like these emotions run a lot of people's lives, and that's not by accident. Our culture is set up to keep us in those emotions because it's easier to control people when they're in those emotions. But if you're on an awakening journey and you have recognized that those are there, you have taken the most crucial step to get out of that, which is to become aware that it's actually happening. It's time to awaken, to bring all the parts of yourself back to this present moment and explore the joy that is your life when you live full out, fully expressed, fully harnessing the joygasmic potential of your body and yourself. Anything is possible, and especially we are here to tell you that deep and fulfilling love is possible and is available for you when you choose that for yourself.
All right. It's nice to meet you, Leah.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So we connected because of your RV birth story, I think. I saw that on one of the groups and was like, we are generally RV lifing. And I was like, it's been so good for me to read other stories about people and hear that other people are doing that too, because it's a bit outside of the conventional. And so I'm really excited to have you here today and to get to chat.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, you know, I've read a little bit about your journey. I read your birth story. It was really beautiful to see and share that. For those people who are listening to the podcast, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into birth work?
Well, I've always been fascinated with pregnancy and childbirth since I was little. I mean, everybody in my family's always had hospital births, so I've never really gotten to attend an actual birth, typically. But when I was pregnant with my first child, I was actually a single mom and I wanted a home birth, but I was living with my parents and my dad wasn't comfortable with it. And it was his house. And so I understood that, and insurance wouldn't cover a birthing center. So I ended up having him in the hospital. And that was a bit of a traumatic experience because, all the interventions and, stuff like that, the typical stuff. And then my second baby, I wanted to have a home birth with her as well, but my husband wasn't, 100% comfortable that, once I got married. And so we ended up doing a hospital birth with that one.
Mm-hmm.
But then the next time around, I really wanted a home birth and he agreed to a midwife. And
Okay. Take your time with your babes. No worries on that. So sweet. I was like, I see this little hand sticking out.
Yeah.
There must be a little one in there.
4 weeks old now.
How old?
4 weeks old now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. You're looking great.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So we wanted to get a midwife, and so I interviewed some, but we just couldn't afford it unless it was a network, which is impossible to find. And we started talking about it, and I thought, well, why not just find a mother or a woman that's had a whole bunch of births and, she's experienced enough and she could just be there as an extra set of hands. But then we couldn't find someone. So I thought about unassisted birth. I thought, why not just go at this alone?
Yeah.
Okay, take it to daddy.
Oh, it's all good.
That's my 3-year-old.
Sweet.
So I looked into unassisted births and got a little bit of information, but I wasn't so sure my husband would go for unassisted. So I just prayed about it And then one day he just came up to me and said, why not just do it ourselves? He's like, baby's just going to come out, right? I'm like, well, yeah. So
Oh, that's great. That's like a beautiful story, the power of prayer, right? Like you don't have to talk him into it. You don't have to convince him. You just go like, this is what, I'm offering this. This is what I think is best. And
yeah, I
yeah,
just a couple days later he came to me. So I was like, oh, that worked.
that's wonderful.
And so right before that, when I was looking into midwives and stuff, I was like, oh, doulas. I'd kind of heard about them, but not really what they do. So I started looking into it and looking into courses and stuff. And I started a course with Birth Arts International.
Okay.
I really enjoyed that. And so throughout that whole pregnancy, I was also taking my course and studying to be a doula, which is
Perfect.
me.
Yeah.
And so we ended up, we were living in town at the time and we just couldn't afford the rent anymore. It was just too much. Like, what's the point of paying rent when we're not buying the house? It's just money going down the drain.
Yeah.
We borrowed an RV from a friend in Texas. They brought it to us, and then we moved on to another friend's property.
Yeah.
And so in this RV with, 2 toddlers and me being very pregnant, expecting any time now. We weren't 100% sure on the due date.
Right.
So
Yeah.
kind of a whenever. So we weren't sure if we're going to give birth in town or in the RV or.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good to hear. It's good to hear, like, okay, even if there's uncertainty in your living situation, just birth happens, right? And it happens when it's time. So,
So about a month after we moved into the RV is when I went into labor.
okay.
I had prodromal labor for I think 2 months leading up to birth,
Okay.
which
Yeah.
it made it even harder to figure out when I was actually in labor. There's
Mm-hmm.
still in town. I thought, oh, this is it. It's like all day long, 10 minutes apart. I was like, this has got to be it. And so my
Right.
husband went to Walmart and grabbed a bunch of stuff because we hadn't gotten stuff yet. And then it was
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah. 10 minutes apart, often for 2 months or something like that. You just continue to have this experience. And wow.
Oh, yeah. So when it actually, when I knew I was in labor, I was having contractions about 45 minutes apart. I think it was like a Monday. And then that night they kind of moved a little bit closer together. And then the next morning it was 30 minutes apart. And then slowly throughout the day. So I went for walks with my kids because it was like that kind of spring fall time.
Yeah.
And I think it was about 9 o'clock at night when I went into active labor. And I was on the birth ball in an RV, which there's not much room in there for that.
No, oh my gosh, it's hard for me to think of a single space in our RV where a birth ball would actually fit. So, but yeah.
So I'm sitting there on the birth ball and we're watching a movie on the laptop and I'm like, I think I want oatmeal. So I got up and while I'm 5 minutes apart and contractions are making a pot of oatmeal and I ate the entire pot.
Like, I need nutrition, give me the oatmeal.
It's so strange. I just had to have oatmeal right then and there. Yeah. So this is my first unmedicated birth. So I
Wonderful.
had an idea of what was, what to expect, at least with contraction wise.
Yeah.
But then, I've always heard people talk about the ring of fire. I did not fully understand it until it happened. That, no joke. And I'm not typically a screamer, but apparently I ended up being one when it came to transition and, actually giving birth when she was crowning.
Yeah, it's an intense time.
Yeah. There's 2 other families living on the property and we're in fairly close proximity. And my husband said, I'm surprised you didn't wake up everybody. And surprisingly, the children didn't wake up either.
Wow. There's something magical about birth that just conks kids out when they're supposed to be out. It's like something in the hormones or the pheromones or something just conks them out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I ended up giving birth in that tiny little bathroom, actually in the doorway, using the doorway as brace to hold myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Husband's behind me, cleaning up and catches the baby. And that was actually his first boy, my second boy. And so that was an amazing experience for him to, not only catch his own child, in birth, but to catch his first son. So, I mean, I look back and I just could see this look on his face that you can't even describe. It was pretty amazing.
Just this week, I got to talk with one of the ladies who's in the mom day calls, the Jogasmic mom birthing calls, and we got to hear from her husband about his experience of birth, and it just like it made me cry just listening to him. I'm like, oh, like so often we have these conversations with moms and moms and moms, and it's like actually it's really powerful for the dads too.
Definitely.
It's like super powerful for them. So
Yeah.
yeah. So, and in terms of your labor, like, how did it feel? The sort of that progression. You mentioned that you were in predominant labor for some time, but then moving from sort of like active labor to like, oh my gosh, we're delivering a baby. Like, what do you notice being different from the hospital experience to having them at home?
So at the hospital, with being in a strange environment and having so many different people coming in and going out, and even family popping in and leaving and coming and going and all that, extra stuff, and stuff, having to be stopped with the focus. You can't focus because you have to be stopped every few minutes to be checked on this or checked on that or given this medication or whatever they feel like they have to do. And so in the hospital, you can't really focus at all. And then you end up thinking about the pain and not, if you just focus on it and absorb the pain and, just roll with it, it's like an ocean wave. If you absorb it, it kind of empowers you to push through. And although it's painful, it's just a completely different kind of pain than what anyone would ever expect. I mean, at least in my opinion. And so being at home, with just myself and my husband, him, rubbing my back and supporting me and encouraging me, it's just like I could close my eyes and just feel it. And like I said, absorb that pain and just push through it. And it was it hurt, but it was just different. It's like a pain that I actually look forward to.
That's interesting. Yeah. Tell me more about that.
So I've always told people, people say, what's your favorite part of pregnancy? I'm like, well, actually it's the labor. And I don't know why. I mean, the first, at first, before I had this free birth, I was, my view of labor was skewed because, epidurals, they take away the pain, so it's like, I'm, pushing through it or whatever, but it's not, it's just different. But even with the free birth for the first couple weeks, after, I was a little bit traumatized at first from it. And I think that was the postpartum depression and stuff that was kind of hitting hard. And I was like terrified of having another baby. And I didn't want to even think about it. And it brought me to tears and all that kind of stuff. And I finally opened up to my husband and talked to him and talked to my best friend about it. And then it just went away. And then after that, I'm like, yes, it was painful, but it didn't last that long. And the pain brought me something good that I'm going to enjoy for the rest of my life. So it's a good pain. And so that's why I look forward to it, because even though it is painful and it's not that much fun, I mean, it's over pretty quickly. And you look at it in the long run.
Yeah. I mean, in the grand scale of a child's life, labor is, a very, very, very short period of time. And there's this beautiful cascade of hormones that allows us to handle that intensity and handle that sensation, pain, whatever it might be. It's like we have these, we've got the pain sensations, but then automatically the beta endorphins come in, and it's like, then you get into runner's high. And you were talking about focusing, right? It's like, if you're interrupted all the time, how can you get that focus to really let that hormonal matrix do its thing to let your baby come through in a good way,
After that first free birth, it's like you said, that runner's high. I had always heard of women talk about when they gave birth unmedicated, as soon as the baby was born, they completely forgot about the pain and it was all better and they held the baby. But I didn't experience that actually. I was fully expecting that and excited to look forward to that. But as soon as the baby was born, I was just so weak. I felt like I was hit by a train. and my husband went and got one of the other ladies from the families, and she came over. They both helped me to the bed. They both practically had to carry me to the bed.
Yeah.
I just laid there with all my muscles, trembling and shaking, and so I
Yeah.
couldn't hardly move at all. And so I
Yeah.
just for a couple days because I just felt like I was sitting by a train.
Yeah.
But the second time around, although I wasn't up to moving around and doing anything, I felt better. It wasn't nearly anything like that. So I think it was
Yeah.
just my body adjusting to that new normal, or the new,
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that, I mean, trembling after birth is fairly common in my understanding. And it's sort of like the nervous system releasing all that stress. If you didn't have that after your second free birth, do you think that maybe some of that was like the labor trauma from your first two births that was processing through in that sort of immediate postpartum of that first free birth?
Well, I had some of the muscle trembling with my second free birth, but it was all like from the waist down. And I think that's
Okay.
from the muscles just working so hard.
Yeah, I mean, labor marathon for sure.
I was a little shaky, but it wasn't anything like the first time where my whole body was just trembling,
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So you've had two free births now, is that right?
Yes. This little one right here is my second free birth. And we actually didn't have her in the RV because the winter was too cold.
Oh,
Way
yeah,
too
gosh.
cold.
Yeah.
Got in the negatives. And
Yeah.
so we stayed in like a 1-room building that's on the
Okay.
property. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Great.
that was a fascinating birth. I had called my mom and she drove an hour and picked up my three other kids, and took them to her house so that it
Okay.
was just us and we didn't have to worry about anything else.
Hallelujah for grandparents.
Yeah, after the first one, our older two were there. And so my husband had to juggle taking care of me for the first, critical 48 hours. And then also, feeding the kids and keeping them occupied in this tiny little space.
Oh my God, that sounds like so much.
Yeah, it felt like a little bit of a disaster.
Yeah, but you made it through. You're still here. You're alive,
Oh, yeah.
like the kids are all alive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. But it's
Yeah.
challenging for sure in a small space.
Out pretty quickly. We didn't actually weigh her because I couldn't find my scale, but judging from my previous babies who were 8 pounds, 8 pounds, and 6 pounds, I think she's about 5.5 pounds.
Okay.
And her preemie size clothes were too big on her still.
Okay.
So, she's a tiny one. She still is, just barely in the newborn clothes. But
Yeah.
her birth was it was so much easier. And I had that prodromal labor build up. And actually, I was in early labor almost a full week, like contractions constantly every day for several days. And then, yeah, it was really frustrating. And there's like 3 days where my kids weren't with me because we thought I was in active labor at first.
Right.
And that just hit some kind of hormonal trigger. And after 2 days of not having them, I just broke down crying to my husband. I was like, bring them to me. He's like, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, well, then they'll be with us.
Yeah. It's like the mama love. It's like, where are my children? Like, but they're gone. What do you mean they're gone? Like, that's unsettling at the best of times. But in the sort of that early labor brain, it's like there must have been something felt really wrong about that.
Couldn't stop crying until he agreed to take me. And yeah, but she was very quick, and the pain was not nearly as bad, and her counting wasn't nearly as bad either as the first time. Like, it didn't burn or hurt quite as much, and I didn't scream that time either. I just kind of grin and bear.
Yeah, your body had learned something, or like understood the process a bit better, and
knew what to expect, I think.
Yeah. And how has your family been? One of the things you mentioned on your call questionnaire thing was that you support people, or the people you work with have challenges with not having family support. So I'm really curious, you mentioned your mom came and took your kids for that last birth, but what did she think? Did you talk to her before that, before that first free birth? Did you talk to your husband's parents or anything like that? How did that go?
We actually told quite a few people. my mom voiced her concerns, and my mom has actually been really good about really anything I bring to her. She will voice her concerns and we'll talk about it. And then if we still have our differences on it, we move on. But she concerns and asked about what our backup plan was for, this emergency, or, things like that. And we talked about it. And then she's been supportive since then. And especially with the second one, she's even more supportive. She knew that we'd be doing it. And she knew that, we'd already experienced the first one. And also I've been taking or slowly taking midwifery courses. So that kind of reassures her a little bit more too. And
Right,
also
yeah.
friends that are midwives that we call or text, with any concerns and stuff like that. So she's, more at ease. We have one family member that's still not so sure about it. She used to be a nurse. And so, I mean, she started midwifery courses and then stopped for some reason, but she's always questioned us, even to this day after 2 successful births. She's still like, well, this could have gone wrong, or this could have gone wrong, or, but we always come back with a answer of, well, if this happens, then we do this, we always have an answer on what we do. So family member that's not too supportive of it. But so far everyone else has been all for it, and they've said they're proud of us, and which makes me happy.
Yeah, it's a really good feeling.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's so wonderful to hear. I definitely work with women who are having challenges with their family members and those communications and stuff. So it's just so wonderful to hear, like, oh, it's possible to have those really kind and respectful conversations. Oh, we have a difference of opinions. Well, still your life. You still get to do what you want with it. And that's really wonderful. What are some of those, you mentioned you have this, you talked to your mom about some of her concerns and you had backup plans for those. Like, what are some of those things in a very specific, concrete way that they were most worried about?
I think my mom was most worried about hemorrhaging and like the cord wrapped around the neck, really basic things like that. That anybody can gain the knowledge of how to fix those. There's herbs and tinctures and stuff that can easily, at the least, slow bleeding to get to a place of assistance if you need that. And really, it's very rare actually for the cord being around the neck to hurt the baby, because they're still getting oxygen from that cord.
Absolutely.
Very rare for it to cause any issues. So, those were really the only 2 concerns that anyone's really voiced to us, is the obvious. Well, and also a breech birth, which I've explained is still natural birth.
What birth?
A breech.
Oh, a breech. Yeah. Breech babies happen. They happen, and it's
natural birth. Yeah. It's very, very possible. More painful, but possible.
Yeah, same with posterior, sort of like this reversed position from like what is conventionally. And one of the things I love about the free birthing world and sort of the traditional midwifery world is this idea that we're expanding what the range of normal is. In the hospital, they have a very, very narrow range of what normal looks like. And it's really the constructed version of normal that they've created as a result of sort of all of the interventions and whatnot. Whereas, a 24 to 48-hour labor or 2 weeks of prodromal labor that's pretty active prodromal labor, like those fall within the range of normal in birth, because we all have different bodies. We all have different ways that we're processing things. Like you said, the cord wrapped around the neck is a fairly common thing to happen in a birth, and it is treated as an emergency in the medical system, and it's really something that needs to be addressed, absolutely, but can be addressed by unwinding the cord rather than snipping it and sort of removing the creating an emergency, which is severing the baby from its source of oxygen before it's really, really ready to do that. And there's lots to be said about sort of delayed cord clamping and lotus birth and all of those concepts, for sure.
Yeah. Birth is just so medicalized these days.
Yeah.
It's just really sad, because it's such a natural and normal part of everyday life, and yet it's treated as a medical condition, that everything is a problem. I've told people with my most recent daughter's birth, her her due date, yeah, here she is. Her due date, according to the last menstrual period, which is what doctors go by, is saying hi.
Hello,
Her
baby.
in December 30th of last year.
Mm-hmm.
But the due date that I had figured up said January 29th or 28th. So there's a whole month's difference.
That's
So
a huge discrepancy.
yeah, so I was like, okay, well, according to all the midwives, I talked to 3 different ones. And according to what the doctors would have said, it would have been December 30th. So I fully expected, okay, she could come December 30th, and nothing happened. And she came January 29th at about 5.5 pounds. So if we would have listened to doctors, they probably would have induced, and then she would have been even smaller, and it would have caused complications, and probably would have been NICU for a while.
Yeah.
Just letting things happen naturally. She came when she was ready.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, and the coming when you're ready thing is so fascinating. We talked a little bit. You come from more of a is it Christian or more of a like a biblical?
A whole Bible, we
Oh,
follow
Bible.
the
Okay.
Bible, so we observe the Sabbath and the biblical feasts.
Okay. Okay, well,
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about that too. We sort of have different worldviews on that, but we definitely agree when it comes to birth being a natural occurrence, right? And when we think about sort of rushing that due day, going, you got to come earlier, you got to come earlier. I mean, I know in my personal experience, I have dealt with this feeling of being late, like I'm chronically late. I've chronically got all these things, and it's like when we think about what we know about limbic imprinting, about the information that goes into the baby as a result of the things that happen around them in the womb beforehand. There's so many people who have anxiety around being late, being good enough, being, ready. And it's like, gosh, how much of that tracks back to the fact that we're not really actually, so many people are not permitted to actually choose when they're entering the world, because so often, like when we talk about the physiological birth, it's actually the baby and the maturity of their lungs and the maturity of their bodies that says, I'm ready to come into this world, rather than some external force. And there's so much to be said about allowing that intrinsic knowing of the human body. The baby's body is infinitely wise to say, okay, yeah, we can choose to enter the world now. It's time, mama.
Yeah.
It's time.
Yeah, with having the 2 different due dates a month apart, it was very frustrating for me not knowing, it's like, okay, any second could be, the time within this full month time between the 2 due dates. And it was stressful and frustrating, but I kept reassuring myself that when her lungs are ready, that's when she'll come. And it was kind of strange. I was doing some reading up. I was having this serious craving for freeze-dried strawberries, of all things. They're just, really delicious. But I started wondering, most cravings are because the body or the baby needs something.
Absolutely.
So strawberries are full of potassium, and potassium is something that's needed for the lungs to develop.
Oh my gosh.
You know what?
That makes so much
Her
sense.
lungs aren't ready. She's just not ready. And I tell you what, I went through a lot of strawberries.
I believe you. I believe you. You're just like, oh,
packages a day. Yeah.
body knows what it needs. It knows what it wants. She's like, great, let's put it in there. And good for you for doing that research and learning and listening on that. And yeah, I mean, and babies have this wide range it's normal for them to come. It's like anywhere from, people say, as early as 35 weeks to as late as 44, 45, something like that. And it's like, that's a 2-month gap. It's like, how can we say 40 weeks, you got to be here, it's time? It's like, it's a little crazy making for me, for sure.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, when you're working with people and helping people to get this birth that they've dreamed of. A lot of women come to the free birthing path from having traumatic hospital births, just like I did, just like you did. And what are some of the obstacles you see that come up for them? What are some of the challenges, and how do you help them deal with that? Oh, baby face. I just love baby face.
The biggest challenge I've seen,
So
challenge
cute.
I've seen is, the family support, the lack of support.
Yeah.
Or they get another thing that I see often is, you know, a lot of these, almost actually quite a few of the women that I've worked with, it's their first free birth. And almost all virtually with these women. So I have clients in all other states.
Right.
I saw the need for it. So, you know, I started that. But the other thing is, when it's your first free birth and you're just coming out of that medicalized normal, you know, birth, they're always like texting me all hours of the day almost, you know, what's this about? Is this normal? You know, I'm experiencing this, or I haven't felt baby kick yet, or, you know, there's just all these questions that are really normal, but they just don't know because, you know, how could they know?
Yeah. I mean, when the programming says birth is a medical event, you got to go to a hospital. It's going to be an emergency. It's going to be traumatic. That's what cultural programming says. We got this image of like a woman on a gurney, like, you know, losing her shit. That's what most women are programmed with. And so when women like you and me and thousands of others say, you can kind of just stay at home and let the baby come out, it's like, what? You know, it can't be that simple. And there's all these worries and concerns and questions and stuff. Yeah.
But I always tell my clients that they can ask me anything. And if I don't know the answer, I will look into it. And I will also check with the midwife friends that I have just to double check my knowledge before giving them an answer. And that always makes me feel more reassured that it's okay, or, you know, whatever. And another concern I've seen is, you know, when it comes to labor, some people have said, well, you know, what happens if I have to transfer? I'm like, well, I'm still here for you. I'm not going to drop you just because you have to transfer. But when they come up with a situation where, you know, they're considering transferring, I always tell them, I will inform you and educate you, but it's ultimately your decision, you know, what you're going to do, and whatever decision you make, I will support you because I've already informed you that you're making the decision on what's best for your family, not my family. So I had a lady that was in transition, and you know how the mindset of transition just goes panic. And she hit that panic trigger, and her husband was in the opposite end of the house with their little one. So he wasn't there to support her, and she was all by herself. And it brought me to tears because I wanted so bad to be right there with her and to give her a hug, because she was panicking, and she was in such a panic state that she was actually subconsciously withholding, you know, pushing, and, you know, she should have already had the baby at that point.
Yeah.
And I told her, you just have to sit up. And every time she'd try to sit up, she was really weak, but she'd be like, well, I can't because it hurts too much. She's like, I just need to take. She did end up transferring, but as soon as she got into the ambulance, she started crowning. And then as soon as she got to the hospital, she gave birth. And that's because comfortable. She was in a safe zone, her own safe zone. She's like, okay, these medical people are here. I'm safe, you know, and then her body felt relaxed enough to give birth.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And if there's a husband there who's sort of being physically supporting because you don't have younger children, or if there's some little bit more support, or if you had been able to physically be there and just like hug her, you know, create this like oxytocin space and like bring that in a little bit more, bring that safety in a little bit more, then, you know, then the body goes, oh, I am safe enough to be here and to really, really relax. And I mean, that's part of the work that I love doing with people is, you know, working before labor shows up to go, let's clear that out. Let's clear that program that says the hospital is the safest place. And let's just get rid of that so that you're not in transition being like, oh my God, I need to be safe and I'm not safe. The safest place is the hospital, right? It's like, that's generally, I mean, sometimes it is the safest place in the case of true emergencies, et cetera. But so often, you know, when we talk about labor, really the safest place is at home, because then you don't put yourself in the danger zone of all of those emergencies. And my opinion is home is the safest place, but it's like so important for me to sort of remember is like wherever the woman actually really feels like this is the safest place for her is the safest place for her, because if your body's not feeling safe, it literally won't open the rest of the way to let that baby out, right?
That's why I always tell them my job is to inform and educate and then support your decision, not my
Yeah.
decision. You
Yeah.
know, if they say, well, should I go to the ER or labor and delivery or whatever? I'm like, well, here's what's going to happen once you get there. And here's things that you will encounter. And, you know, you can always ask me once you get there, you know, should I do this or should I do that? You know, things like that, or what's in this medicine. But, you know, that's your decision. It's where you feel is best for you and your baby. And I think that's what really reassures women the most.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we talk about traumatic hospital birth versus like empowered hospital birth, because both of those are possible, it really comes down to like respecting the autonomy of the woman, giving her the choice. I did a podcast interview with Dr. Sierra, which I can link to if people want to listen to that. And she had a transfer, you know, she's planning a home birth and she transferred. And at first, when she got there, she's really like, oh, felt really unsafe. And she literally just went like, she popped out of labor land and was like, look, nurse people, here's how this is going to go. You got to ask me about every single thing that happens. You've got to check in with me about any sort of procedure. You want to touch my body, you got to check with me. You want to do an internal check, you've got to check with me, right? And she put these boundaries up. This is like, this is my autonomy. Can't mess with that. And she said later on, the nurses are like, would you like some water? It's in a plastic bottle. Is that okay? I don't know if that's okay. You know, they're coming at her with a really different, like, instead of like, honey, we're putting you on Pitocin, it's like, is this okay? You know, and really doing that check-in. And I think when that autonomy is in place, then the hospital births can have a totally different flavor than when sort of you go in being like, I don't know what to do. I'm lost. Please save me. And it's part of the challenge of the trauma of hospital birth is that energy of please save me in this moment that should be one of the most connected, like powerful, I can do this, I did this sort of moments of our lives.
Yeah. Well, and that's where having a doula physically there with you, if you have to go to the hospital, is really great, because I've heard there's a lot of debate over whether a doula should be, I can't think of the word now, mom brain, I guess. But you know, be that voice for the woman, you
Like
know,
the advocate.
you know, like if I'm in a hospital setting, I'm not comfortable, you know, typically standing up for myself. That's where, you know, my husband comes in.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I always tell them when they ask me, I'm like, talk to my husband, because I'm not in a frame of mind to, you know, make decisions usually. And so that's where a doula comes in, a good doula. You know, if the mother tells her, I don't want to do this, or I need to do this, that's where the doula needs to step up to the doctor and say, look, this is what's going to happen, or this is not going to happen. Here's her boundaries. We're not crossing those.
Yeah.
There's quite a few doulas who won't do that. You know, they'll support the one, but they're not going to be that voice.
Yeah.
But that's where you need a good support person to set those
Yeah.
boundaries for those women who can't do it themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in an ideal situation, they have set that boundary by putting that trust in the doula to say, like, look, you're going to hold that boundary for me because I know I'm going to be in la labor land and not really able to do that myself. And there is something to be said about like the permeability of sort of the psyche in that labor experience. It's like we don't necessarily have the like it should be a really open and expansive to the environment around us experience. And when that environment around us is challenging, threatening,
Exactly.
berating, you know, there's a lot of really terrible stories I hear from ladies about their challenging hospital birth experiences. You know, and really we should be treating pregnant women with reverence and respect and understanding they can make their own decisions, and if they've already made those decisions, respecting them, you know. Yeah. Ugh. There's so much to be said for creating that birth that you really want.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think back, you know, now that I've free birth babies and gotten into this whole more natural, normal world, it makes me think back to the hospital births. And that first one, I was given an epidural, even though I went in active labor, 5 minutes apart and everything, classic active labor. They said, we're going to give you an epidural and we're going to give you Pitocin. And they gave me Pitocin and broke my water at the same time, which was insanely terrible. Never do that again. And then
right.
what I didn't know was that when I was pushing, apparently the doctor had given me an episiotomy without telling me.
Mm.
I found out
Yeah.
when I was holding the baby, and he says, I got to stitch you up real quick. I went ahead and cut you to make sure you didn't tear. I'm like, wait, what? Of course, I
No,
was
right?
19 at the time, so I didn't know any different. I thought, well, he knows best because he's, the doctor.
Yeah, that's such a common mindset for sure.
Yeah. But thinking back, there's just so many things wrong with that birth, the whole process of it, with all the medications they gave me. And so suddenly and so quickly, it caused the baby's heart rate to drop. So it kept dropping every time I had contraction. And they blamed it on me, saying I wasn't breathing enough. But I'd gone through a natural birth class. And so I knew to breathe, and I was doing my breathing exercises. And I was like, no, I'm breathing. And then, I wear glasses, and they shove this oxygen mask on me, which is uncomfortable. And it just, yeah. So it's just so many, it puts me into more stress,
Mhm. Yeah.
which happens every time with every woman that goes in almost.
Yeah, it is really common. I mean, the stories that I hear of hospital births that are okay to good, they always involve the woman being like, "These are my boundaries. You will not effing cross them." That's the only way that happens. And yeah, I mean, I just recently asked my grandma about my mom's birth story, and that was really fascinating because I mean, it's a long time ago. So, her memories changed and faded, but she also remembers lots of things really clearly. And, she wasn't physically conscious for the birth of my mom. She got like knocked out. She, laughing gas or put under or something like that. And it's like she has, she woke up later and she talked to me about how she was packed with ice. She didn't talk to me about where my mom was. She didn't talk
Wow.
to me about the relationship, the dynamic, from there. Her memory was like, oh yeah, and the doctor there was really nice. And then remember, I had all these other doctors after that, it's not about the relationship with my mom. And I'm just like,
Wow.
like
Yeah.
the beauty of birth is that after all that crazy hormone, the beauty of physiological birth is after all those hormones go, you go, you're here. Oh, I love you, and that
Yeah.
bonding creates so much connection, and it helps us move through the rest of that mothering journey with so much more grace,
Well, and
with
it's
so much.
important for the body to physically get back to where it's supposed to be, because those hormones trigger other things to happen,
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
like the uterus going back down to size, on its own. Those are things that, and nursing, things like that are needed for that. My grandmother, before she passed, thankfully told me about, as a child, she told me these stories. So there was even more terrifying being a child than hearing these stories. But my grandparents were missionaries overseas in South America, and they had all
Okay.
5 of their children over there. And for most of her births, her husband was not allowed in the room. And she's told me about, I don't remember which of her kids it was, but one of them, she was strapped down to a table and just left. And then when the baby started coming out is when the doctors and nurses came back in. I was like, wow, and her husband my grandfather was not allowed in the room with her at all. So she's alone, strapped to a table, laboring all by herself. I'm like, I can't even begin to imagine, the stress and everything that it puts women through.
The psychological trauma, like we're human animals, and traditionally, like, women would go to the darkest, quietest corner they could find, and then their needs would be tended to by the women around them who had been through birth and knew what that looked like. And so to be like, you're all alone, no options, can't go anywhere, can't move. Oh my God, how much of birth is about moving where you want to and how you want to? You're strapped down. There's just so many things wrong with that. And I mean, I think a lot of that started when women started putting industrial medicine and white male doctors, for the large part, in charge of birth and handing over that power. And I think that's why that's part of why I do the podcast, because I'm just like, you birthed in an RV, you've had 2 unassisted births after 2 traumatic medical births. Were your home birth traumatic? They might have had aspects of challenge, but you're not like, oh, I'm going to go back to that medical system. No part of you says like, oh yeah, that was really challenging, let's go back to the hospital for this 5th one or whatever. It's like, no, we're claiming birth back. We're sharing the stories. And sometimes I go, oh, I wish there was stats about home birth. I wish there were stats that said home birth was safe. And it's like, And it's like, well, that's my rational, logical mind that's been trained to trust doctors over bodies talking, saying I need some stats to make sure this is okay. And that's part of how I got really passionate about just like sharing people's stories, because as I started listening to the stories, I went, oh, this is softening me. This is calming those logical, rational parts and says, I can trust the stories of women because women are trustworthy. Oh, then I can trust myself. I can trust, they trust their bodies. I can trust my body. Like, what a beautiful journey that is to go through that and come back to it.
Well, and hospital births are still kind of, I guess you could call a fairly new concept, because it was trying to remember the exact year, but I'll ballpark it in like the 1870s, 1880s, something like that, is when it started. Doctors started wanting to do hospital births. And that's because family doctors thought, hey, if we help these women give birth, then they're more likely to stick around with us as their doctor because we know their child from birth. And then it just became more, the rich people started doing it, and then it just started spreading from there on out.
Yeah.
And
That's,
yeah, that was basically the only reason, money.
and you're like, that's less than 150 years. Humans have been giving birth for upwards of 2,000, 6,000, twenty
Yeah.
thousand, depending on, where you define human at, right? It's like, and how you look at it. Obviously, I recognize some people have different versions of when humanity started as well, just honoring that. Um, you know, it's like, there's since then women have been birthing at home, and every single woman that's alive today is the product of a pair of hips that had the capacity genetically to have birthed her, so
Yeah.
yeah,
And
there's so much.
it's kind of fascinating how our first free birth kind of reframed our mindset, not just of the medical field, but of how we can do things ourselves at home. So if our baby's born healthy, why is there a need to take our child to a building with sick people to well check them? Well, they're well. I can see they're well, I can take their vitals. I
You
mean,
can
there's,
you can put your head on their chest and listen to their
yeah,
heartbeat and see if it sounds regular. You know exactly when they're pooping. You know exactly when they're peeing. You know, no, no amount of hospital care is going to be able to check in on that in the same way that you can.
yeah, it's reframed our mindsets to the point where we do things ourselves at home. We find natural remedies. I mean, because these plants and stuff are on this earth for a reason,
Absolutely.
they're there for us to use. So we use them. And 90, I'd say 99% of the time, it all, whatever we find naturally, it works.
Yeah.
The only times we've needed a doctor is when there's a massive emergency, like when I was pregnant with her. I think I was about 16, 17 weeks along, and I had my other 3 children with me, and I was riding with my friend in her car because we would go grocery shopping together. And she had her youngest child of, I think she had 5 or 7, something like that. She had a youngest daughter with her. So we were out grocery shopping, and we were getting ready to head back, and kind of out of the blue, we ended up in a multiple rollover car wreck.
Oh my gosh.
Road, and it was being repaved, so it's kind of gravelly, and just got a little bit too close to the edge of the road. So she corrected, but overcorrected, and it caused us to spin. I remember spinning, and I wasn't buckled because I kept having to turn around in my seat to give, my baby's pacifier or tell the kids to sit still or, whatever.
Yeah.
So I remember spinning, and then I remember we started to roll. And then after that, I don't remember anything until we woke up. And I just remember waking up and on a gurney outside and being put in an ambulance and then being put in a helicopter. And I was life flighted an hour away to a trauma hospital. And I mean, I'm 16 weeks pregnant with a baby, and my other 3 kids, thankfully someone drove by and saw the wreck. But my children's seatbelts, according to my friend's daughter, had come undone. All of their seatbelts had come undone, and I wasn't buckled. I was ejected 15 feet from the vehicle,
Oh my
which
gosh.
is a miracle that I lived to begin with, let alone her,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's to her pregnancy and birth and everything that's just it was very different from any other pregnancy, obviously, because that healing process. But the babies can, when they're in the womb, they can send those healing cells to you to heal faster.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
The actual term. I remember posting about it, but they can send that to you to heal faster, and it's pretty amazing. So my healing process was, I'd say, fairly quick. I only had one fracture in my eye socket right here. So I think I had about 36 stitches.
Wow.
That also brings me back to having that support, because my husband showed up at the hospital and they wanted to give me a COVID test and all this stuff. And they wanted to put me in the ICU, even though all my tests came back clear and I was okay with, the exceptions. And I said, no, we're not doing that. And they kept trying to shoo him out of the hospital, saying, you can't have him in here because COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's staying because I can't make decisions for myself. They're like, well, what causes you to not be able to make decisions? Or do you have a medical issue or something? I was like, no, he's staying.
And there, that's like, had you not had that first home birth and sort of anchored into that sense of like, I make my own decisions, it's much easier to go into like, oh, they know best. And it's like, what's best for a family is to be together generally, barring like physical abuse, sexual abuse, mental, physical, whatever abuse, like barring abuse in the family, generally the best thing is for the family to be together and to have that support. You're in hospital, of course you want your partner there, like holding your hand, rubbing your face, being like, it's okay, sweetie, you'll be better, and taking you home as soon as possible. And
Yeah.
it's
He was in shock too, just from being, getting that phone call and having to come to the scene of everything. So, I mean, yeah.
We just shake that out a little bit, like we just give it a shake out. But at the same time, like it totally speaks to the resilience of the human body. Like you're 16 weeks pregnant with a baby, you went flying through a dash of a car, you kept your pregnancy, your body healed. Like the body has such an integral ability to heal. And yes, it's probably a good thing, that you had the ability to get stitched up and checked out. But that's really different. We started on this talking about the power of plants to heal. And it's like, and you brought up that really intense story as an example of, okay, here is a use case for Western medicine. But I bet once you got home, you put salve that maybe you made yourself on your wound to help it heal.
I had a send me a package with like 3 or 4 different salves, all really great herbs and, organic natural stuff that they'd picked from their own yard and made themselves. And I healed very quickly. You can barely even see my scars, along my eye and on my cheek and stuff. You can barely see it now. And that's because of the natural healing power of plants.
Mm-hmm. I had a I don't know if a second or third degree burn on this knuckle. You can see it's really red. This is about a month ago. It was out to here. It was a really I don't know, maybe like a half an inch, just like this big bubble. I had made these salves myself and I just kept putting them on whenever it felt itchy or dry or whenever it was uncomfortable. I just put it on and it's like, go figure, it healed up. The skin's fine. Like it didn't even hurt really that much. And it's incredible what plants can do. Oh, yeah. And I think there's a really big difference too between flying through a car window and a skin rash, flying through a car window and natural birth and delivery.
Yes.
It's really radical. One of them is this traumatic, sort of jarring, unexpected, physically violent experience. Whereas if we've got sort of even asthma, like there's natural treatments for that. There's that's something I used to have, and there's so many choices when it comes to plants. I'd love to hear about some of your favorite plants that you like using. If you have thoughts around that.
I've made a few salves myself. I like buying them from a friend that makes it and sells it. But one thing I like keeping on hand with allergies and stuff like that, and with it being kind of cold and congestion time of the year, oregano essential oil. It's a natural antibiotic, and it also clears mucus and opens up the airways. And if my children are congested, I get the roller bottle. Go on, Jethro. I get the little bottle and I put it on chest and back and bottom of the feet. And within a few hours, they're congestion free.
Mm.
And amazing. And I do that, a couple times a day for, maybe 2 days, and then it's gone.
That's incredible. And I just want to clarify for anybody who's new to essential oils, it's absolutely important to dilute them in some sort of carrier
Yeah.
oil because you can burn your skin with them. I've had a couple people be like,
Yeah.
they stay away from essential oils because they've heard about this burning. It's like you take 1 or 2 drops of this really potent oil, you mix it in with some coconut oil, olive oil, whatever your favorite sort of skin oil is, and yeah, absolutely, it heals up really fast or clears out really fast. And it's because the skin is an organ as well. It has the ability to pull those in. Tell me
Well,
about some
and
of your others.
let's see. I like using a mixture of plantain and calendula,
Yes.
and various things that I can find just around the yard, really. Those cute little tiny purple flowers on those, what people call weeds. It's purple dead nettle, and it's called dead nettle because it doesn't sting. There's a type of nettle plant that if you step on it or touch it, it stings, and it feels actually like a bee sting, and it hurts. But the dead nettle does not, and it's really good for things like asthma, allergies, just so many different things. I've made that into a salve, and I've also used that for tinctures or infused oil. I haven't made tincture yet, but infused oil, and use that for various things. Those are some of the basic ones that I've kept on hand. Honey, I keep raw honey because the kids get a scratch and rub it on within an hour or so, it's healed up. It's amazing.
I didn't know that one about honey. That's new for me. That's so exciting.
I actually had learned about that when I was in high school, and my dog had gotten a really big gash on the top of her nose, on her snout from fighting badger or something. So I cleaned it up and I put some honey on it, and she, of course she licked it off because it's something on her nose. But the next morning there was fresh pink skin over it. It was already healed up. I was like, wow. So I keep raw honey on hand now. I've heard seaweed, if you get the organic natural seaweed, I've heard it can do about the same thing. A lot of women use that for tears.
Yeah, so, I've heard that putting like kombu or I think kombu is the one I've heard of most commonly, but literally just putting that on the vagina wherever that tearing is, and it's just it's full of nutrients, right? So it's literally just like physically transdermally. It's like you're gonna put a Band-Aid full of plastic and chemicals on that, or you can put some like seaweed on it. I had another. I burn myself sometimes. We've got a sauna and stuff like this, but I had a tea burn a couple years ago. We were way out in the bush, like maybe 2 hours from anything that might resemble medical care. And I had a little first aid kit, but what I actually ended up doing is I got I found some plantain locally, and I just literally stuck it in my mouth and chewed it up, and I put it on the place that was burned, and then I had some beeswax like wrap, so it's like a cloth infused with beeswax, and I literally just wrapped it around and just kept it like that for a couple of days. I'd find more plantain, I'd unwrap it, find more plantain, chew it up, put it in there, put some CBD in there too because I like that one as a plant medicine as well, and it healed up really fine. And it's like, oh my God, the body has the ability to heal. Women worry a lot about tears, and I don't know, you mentioned that. Maybe that's something we could touch on really briefly.
Yeah. I kept, or before I had her, just in case I did tear, I got some organic seaweed and of course raw honey on hand, and go sit with your dad just real quick.
We're almost wrapped up. Thank you.
He's almost 5, so he's short attention span. Anyway,
his mama back,
right? I explained to my husband, if I tear, we'll clean it up as much best as we can, and put some honey on it, and then put the seaweed over the honey. I thought, well, 2 things that are really great at healing, might as well combine them, So tears are really easy to fix as long as it's not like all the way down.
Yeah. I mean, there's degrees to those tears, but if you look on the unassisted free birthing group, like there's so many women who are like, yeah, I had 2nd, 3rd, 4th degree tears, and I laid in bed with my legs closed, for a week, 2 weeks, something like that. And I mean, it takes support. You have to have support to be able to really rest like that. But that is really, really what is needed. And we think about like almost everybody's bitten their cheek at some point, it's bleeding, it's sort of like this open wound. It heals up within 10 minutes, 20 minutes, something like that, a lot of the time. And it's
Yeah.
because it's a mucous membrane. And same with the vagina, it's a mucous membrane. It's got that same sort of quality that the mouth has of being able to heal and repair itself really, really quickly. And so, a lot of women go, "Oh, I tore. That's a bad thing. I failed in birth." And it's like, absolutely not. Like, your body
Yeah.
did what it needed to do to get the baby out in the time that the baby wanted to come out in and that you wanted it to come out in. And there's tools to be able to heal up those wounds if they happen. They don't have to happen, but if they happen, we've got tools and natural tools to
Exactly.
heal up them,
Yeah.
you know?
Very
Yeah.
natural.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we're almost at the end of our call time here. I so appreciate your time with me today.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, so you support women virtually, regardless of where they're at in the world. You said you're based in the US though.
Yes.
If women want to get a hold of you, what does that kind of support look like? Just because I think not very many people are familiar with virtual doula support. Usually we think about it being in person. So maybe just share a little bit about that and then how people can reach you.
Yeah. So with my virtual business, basically I start with a simple, I call it the consultation, like the first appointment, where I talk with a woman, we talk about their previous births, any sort of traumas or past, history that I should be concerned about. If they were to transfer to the hospital, I would need to know about, allergies or just really anything like that. Because if they don't have someone with them, I can be on the phone with, a nurse or someone like that to say, hey, this person, needs this extra, whatever. So
Yeah.
I really get to know the woman and not just about her background, but about what she sees or envisions herself doing with this birth that she's planning. How
Yeah.
does she see the birth going? How does she want to see the birth going? What comforts does she already know that she likes and enjoys? And then what are some comforts, or coping mechanisms that she wants to try out or learn about? We go over an emergency backup plan. If something's to happen, what's your plan? Who are you going to call? Where are your kids going to go? Things like that, because not many women think about that. And I make sure that they have that plan and they email it to me because,
Mhm.
sometimes they can't talk when they get to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And, so I really get to know them, how they want to see their birth, their past birth. And then from there, I use the book Home Birth on Your Own Terms by Heather Baker.
Wonderful
She's
book. Yeah.
one of the midwives I consult with on many occasions. She's very sweet. And so I use that book and I always send them one. It's part of their part of the price. They, a part of the fee.
Yeah.
And we go through that book chapter by chapter. I send them questions, give them a reading assignment, send them questions. They send me their answers back and we talk about it. We talk about any questions they have within those chapters, or how to
Wonderful.
do something that the book says. So throughout their pregnancy, we go through that book. And then we also address any concerns. So I'm available for clients to text me just about any time. Now from on Saturday, which is the Sabbath, I won't respond to messages or calls unless it's an emergency or birth,
Mhm.
of course. But usually I respond within an hour or so or less, just to any question they have, or even if they just had a bad day, really emotional day, I'm just there for them to talk to and get it all out because
Aw.
we need to speak to, process our emotions and process how things happen. And without that, you're just not going to have a very pleasant pregnancy, really.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I mean, it builds up. And the tension builds up in the hips, and then that causes all sorts of issues down the road, right?
you know, I'm there for all their questions and emotional needs and educational needs. And then when it comes time to birth, most of the women, it just kind of depends on each individual woman, but most women will text me during labor and, we talk to them, encourage them, remind them to drink water, go to the bathroom, things like that. When they get to the point where they can't text or can't talk on the phone or video, usually the birth partner, usually husband, picks up and I coach the husband or the birth partner through it, which is a whole different experience. Most doulas, most in-person doulas are coaching the woman and supporting the woman. But when the husband's there, I have to say, now, don't forget, remind her to go to the bathroom, remind her to take a drink, try doing this, try rubbing her back, ask her if she needs this, or don't ask her, just do it because it needs to be done. And a lot of times they're like, okay, it's this far apart, or she's making this noise. Is that okay? I'm like, yes, that's good, or no, whatever. But
Mhm.
a lot of husband coaching, which is
Yeah,
it's a whole new experience because husbands need that support too.
absolutely.
Everybody forgets about the husbands. They have their own set of emotional needs through it all. And I have to remind them to eat and drink as well, because if they're not, hydrated and well fed during that, they can't properly support their wife either.
Yeah.
So, I coach them through that. If they end up transferring to the hospital, I stay on the phone with them, or they'll call me back once they get there. With with one client, they ended up having to go to the hospital, and they called me and talked to me and said, here's what the doctor wants to do, what do you think? And I said, okay, here's the facts on these. Here's what they're going to want to do if you don't do this, or if you say no, or if you say yes, or we talked about their options and stuff like that. So I'm here for emotional support and the educational support,
Yeah.
whatever the couple needs. I'm there for both of them.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
after birth, I do, usually depending on the package they choose, I do at least 2 follow-ups, if not more, usually more, because I'm really concerned about after, birth, postpartum and stuff. It's a
Super
very
important.
important time. And I'll text them or call them at least once a week, usually twice or more. And I'll ask them how breastfeeding is going if they're doing that. We'll video checks. I did go through a breastfeeding counselor course, so I'm not a lactation consultant, but through my own experience and through the course, I can help troubleshoot some things. So we'll video chat for that, help with latching and stuff like that. And I always ask them a series of questions that will help me gauge their emotional status for postpartum depression, anxiety, and postpartum rage, which isn't ever talked about.
Super important to talk about.
Because so many women have postpartum rage and they don't know what it is. They think they're a bad mother for it, and it's completely normal. It just needs extra help. I'm adamant about, following up multiple times throughout that postpartum first month at least.
Yeah.
And they can, of course, purchase additional, months to follow up and stuff like that. But,
Yeah.
I'm every step of the way from the beginning to the end and after. And I still, message with my clients, previous clients. They'll say, hey, we're trying to conceive, do you have any advice? Or, hey, my baby's doing this or not doing that. So, I keep up with my previous clients.
That's wonderful. Sounds like you offer a really fantastic, comprehensive support, and so much of what is needed, right? Is like that emotional support, knowing you have somebody trusted to ask, and who's got that education, who's got that information, has other people they can ask for, second and third opinions, and really forming that sort of emotional connection that is so important to have with somebody who's supporting you in your birth, and at the same time allowing for like a really allowing women to really make their own choices and to have their own journeys as well, right? Like you're not physically there necessarily. And so, you can free birth, but also really have that support. And I absolutely love that. I want to see more of that in the world. It's something I'm working to support as well. I feel like I've got a whole nother set of questions to pick your brain about how you're doing that. But I want to respect our time today, and your kids have been knocking.
Yeah. I saw the need for virtual support because I had a ton of people tell me it wouldn't work. And they still tell me that. They say, well, you shouldn't do virtual work because blah, blah, blah. I say, well, I'm doing it anyways because there are women who want to free birth, but they don't want that extra person in their home, that, someone new still, even if you've gotten to know them their whole pregnancy, it's still a new person. So, they just want that support without the extra person in the room.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Can hang you up at any time. Right? Call you
yeah,
when you need you, hang you up when you don't want you
exactly.
there. It's like, oh great, I don't have to manage, because a lot of people, a lot of women want to hostess if somebody's there. It's like you shouldn't be hostessing in labor ever,
No,
like should be receiving. And yeah, it just sounds, it's really incredible. Well, I'd love to have you. I just started this new site called freebirthsupport.com, and it's really about creating that mother to mother support group, and then allowing people to connect with practitioners like yourself who are offering virtual or in-person services. So I'll love to send you an email after this and let you know how you can put yourself on there and get listed, um, and then hopefully find more people through there, and with the podcast and whatnot as well. Yeah.
all right. Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to share? Is there any last words or words of wisdom for women who are considering free birth that you want to share before we go today?
I think I think I talked about just about everything I usually, cover the basis. But one thing I always tell people, and it's kind of funny, I heard it somewhere a long time ago, but babies are not pizzas. We don't deliver them. They're born. And so I tell everybody that, they talk about, doctor delivering a baby. I'm like, no, my baby's not a pizza. It wasn't delivered. She was born.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And they choose their own time in their own way, and we can do our best to custodian that journey and support that journey, right? So, yeah. Well, I'm so grateful for your time today, Leah. It's been absolutely such a joy to talk with you and see
Yeah.
you, juggling this motherhood and sharing your wisdom at the same time. You know, um, it's really, really beautiful.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate your time today. It's been fabulous.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Yeah. Do you have a website or Facebook connection where people can get a hold of you if they're interested in connecting?
Yeah, my website is down at the moment. Forgot to pay the fee this month.
That happens sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it'll be back up when it's back up because people will hear this later. What's your website?
Okay, so the website is hbabiesfreebirth.com.
Okay.
And my Facebook page is Heritage Babies Birth Keeper.
Wonderful.
Recently kind of switched, been transitioning from calling myself a doula to more of a birth keeper, because
Yeah.
kind of in that between, midwife and doula, and I do a lot more than just doula work. So,
Yeah.
suggesting herbal remedies, which doulas don't do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time. I wish you a beautiful day, and yeah, we'll connect again. I'd love to have you on and maybe share some more wisdom in the future.
Yeah. Anytime you want to pick my brain or just chat, let me know.
Thank you so much, Leah. I so appreciate it.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to today's interview with me. There is so much more waiting for you. If you would like to access the bonus exclusive membership content, which includes the finale of this interview and some really exciting exercises, then please head over to bulletproofmoms.com/member, which will allow you to access not only the end of this interview, but also the video format, which has some really interesting visuals that don't make it through the processing in the audio, as well as the end of this interview, as well as bonus meditations, brain training tracks, and access to our online school, which includes courses like Relationship Reset, Circles of Commitment, How to Save Your Relationship and How to Save Your Marriage, How to Make Intelligent Decisions as a Single Mom When You Begin Dating Again, and many other courses, including the Joygasmic Birth course, your complete guide to creating a joyful, ecstatic, pain-free, and pleasurable birth. And you will also get to see the really silly dance that my son is doing in the background of me talking in this video. So I absolutely encourage you to join the membership. It is pay what you want, and there is a wide range of payment options available. So if you are on a limited income, absolutely do not think that cash is a barrier to your ability. I'm sorry, I'm barely being able to keep it together because my son is just doing the silliest dance, and it's totally worth it to upgrade just to see how ridiculous he is. I absolutely love you guys, and I'm so grateful to be able to make this content available for free. And thank you so much to everyone who is already subscribed as a member and who allows me to continue doing this wonderful work and being of service to you all in this way. Thank you so much for your support. And the credit song from the beginning of the podcast is from a beautiful friend of mine who I met in La Cruz de Guanajuato. Well, La Cruz de Guanajuato. La Cruz de... How does it go again?
Mom, it's La Cruz de Guanacaxtli.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that one. Oh my gosh. I used to think of it as La Cruz de Guanacaxtli, but that's not how you pronounce it. It's really a terrible pronunciation. La Cruz for short, which is near Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and he's an absolutely incredible musical artist, so please go check out Sonny, Sonny, and his work on Spotify. There's also links to that in the show notes. So again, thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the membership. Alex, you want to say anything before we go? Oh yeah. It's important to be silly, and you can claim your silly back. We've got classes coming out on that too. Mwah. So if you're still here and you're still listening, obviously there is some more engagement that you would like to be a part of. Please head over and join the membership. The link is in the show notes. So much love to you.